Burgh Castle Roman fort was one of a string of forts built by the Romans in the late 3rd century AD to protect what was then known as the Saxon shore, the vulnerable eastern coastline of England between the Solent and the Wash. This fort, known as Garionum, was responsible for controlling the entrance to the River Waveney. Saxons later occupied it, and a Motte and Bailey castle was built within the walls following the Norman conquest. The site was also possibly the location of Knobbersburg, the 7th century monastery founded by Saint Furgia, the first Irish missionary in southern England. Although the walls are still sturdy and in places well preserved, much of the original flint and tile of the walls has been lost in the centuries since the fort's demise, plundered for local building work. Originally, this would have commanded an imposing position looking towards Caister, but changes in the sea level and silting up have relegated it to a quiet part of the river. It was built in the 3rd century AD to defend the Roman province from marauding Saxons and was an impressive fortress. Even today, visitors will see walls rising to more than 15 feet or 5 metres. This stronghold is said to have been the place where the Irish missionary St Fursey arrived in England in about AD 630. One of the first things he did was to found a monastery, which he called Knobbersburg, although nothing remains of this today. Later, Fursey removed himself to France so that he could become a proper hermit. He founded a monastery near Paris, and when he died, his body declined to rot. He was declared a saint, and various parts of his corpse toured the country until most were destroyed during the French Revolution. The head was said to have survived though, and is still an object of reverence in Péronne in Picardy. A fort was built here around AD 300 as part of the Roman network of coastal defences, and probably abandoned just over 100 years later. 3 of its 4 massive stone walls survive, almost to their original height, making this one of the best preserved Roman monuments in Britain. This fort was one of a series of at least 9 Roman coastal forts in eastern and southern England, known as the forts of the Saxon shore. The earliest of these were built sometime after AD 200. The later Roman period in Britain was a turbulent time, when life in East Anglia was affected more and more by seaborne raiders from the continent. The present defences at Burgh Castle date to around AD 300. Large parts of the fort's walls still stand almost to their full height. No other Roman building in East Anglia has survived so well. The fort was probably also an important centre for trade in the later Roman period. It formed part of a network that included much of Europe, extending from Britain as far as Egypt, Palestine and Turkey in the east. This reminds us that Roman East Anglia was closely connected to a very much wider world and was an important part of a great empire. At Burgh Castle we can see how an even apparently remote place in the Roman Empire was an important cog in a formidable machine that governed and exploited much of Europe and Asia. After the Roman invasion of AD 43, the Iceni or Iceni tribe, who lived in Norfolk and much of Suffolk, seem to have cooperated with the new administration. A dispute with the Romans on the death of their king, Prasutagus, in AD 60 sparked the famous rebellion led by his widow Boudicca. This caused devastation across southern England and may have come close to toppling Roman rule in Britain. After Boudicca's defeat, the Romans took full control of a conquered land. A network of Roman roads linked places in East Anglia and connected it to the rest of Britain. The people of this territory would have used Roman pottery and coins, and some of them adopted a Roman lifestyle. However, All of them, except a very small number of administrators, were descended from Iceni tribal people rather than coming from Italy. The Romans governed Britain until AD 410, but life had become more and more unsettled for some time before then. By around AD 300, the south and east coasts were experiencing raiding and piracy by people from mainland Europe, many of them Saxons and Franks from present-day Germany. Britain may have appeared a wealthy place to these adventurers. Trade between Britain and the rest of the Roman Empire was very important and needed to be protected. Major exports from East Anglia included pottery from the kilns at Brampton to the northwest of Burgh Castle near Aylsham, and also grain. In the 3rd century AD, the Romans built a series of at least 9 large forts spaced at intervals between Brancaster in North Norfolk and Portchester near modern-day Portsmouth to the south. In Norfolk, the forts at Burgh Castle, Caister-on-Sea and Brancaster were part of this group, described in a late Roman document as the forts of the Saxon shore. This coast may have been called the Saxon shore because it was attacked by Germanic peoples, or because the North Sea was perhaps then called the Saxon Sea. The forts had several roles which changed over time. Raiding probably increased during the 4th century AD. Perhaps the forts were first intended as defended trading or market centres, or as naval bases protecting merchant shipping. The network of forts was linked by a line of coastal signal stations. Some of these have been recognised, while others have now fallen into the sea. The Saxon shore forts were under the control of one official, the Count of the Saxon Shore, who commanded soldiers from across the Roman Empire. The Burgh Castle fort was large enough for between 500 and 1,000 foot soldiers, or up to 500 mounted soldiers and their horses. In AD 395, we know that a mounted unit from the German Rhineland, the Equites Stablesiani, was based here. The remains of a cavalry helmet have been found at the site. Raiders would not have attacked these massive forts head-on. Instead, they probably landed at isolated places. Mounted troops could have travelled quickly to deal with trouble along the coast. The civilian settlement, or vicus, just outside the defences, occupied a much larger area than that of the fort. Farmers, craftspeople and traders living here provided services to those living within the walls. The story of Burgh Castle is their story too. Further excavation may one day tell us more about their lives. In Roman times, the shape of East Norfolk and Suffolk was very different from that of today. Sea levels were much higher. The marshlands of the Norfolk Broads were occupied by a great deep water estuary. The rivers Yare, Waveney and Burgh could be navigated far inland by large ships. A Roman lighthouse at Breydon may have helped sailors travel up the River Yare to the local capital at Caister St Edmund, south of modern Norwich. To the north and south of the mouth of the estuary lay the islands of Flegg and Lothingland. Where the town of Great Yarmouth stands today, there was no dry land at all. The fort of Burgh Castle now overlooks reed beds, but in Roman times it lay next to a sheltered harbour. The forts at Burgh Castle and at Caister probably worked as a pair, controlling the mouth of the great estuary. The walls survive almost to their original full height, although a parapet, now missing, protected soldiers patrolling the wall top. The defences were strengthened by a series of projecting bastions sited at the corners of the fort and at intervals along the walls. These huge drums of masonry were added when the walls were half built. In the middle of the top of each bastion there is a hole in the masonry, which may have held the base of a platform or a large catapult. The scene in Roman times was different in many ways. The west wall of the fort has vanished. Probably it collapsed down the steep slope above which it had been built. The walls were once faced everywhere in flint and tile. This has mostly been taken away to be used in other building work, except in parts of the south wall. We know little about the buildings that lay within these defences because there has been little excavation. They could have been timber or stone. In Roman times, sea level was much higher than it is today. The shape of East Anglia's coast was then quite different, and deep water extended far inland along the river valleys. In the medieval period, the landscape was again wet, and the Norfolk Broads, originally dry peat cuttings, eventually filled with water. Climate change and sea level rise may change East Anglia's coastline again. Before modern roads existed, travel by sea would often have been easier and faster than overland travel. In good weather, traders, settlers and raiders could have journeyed freely around the coastal waters of the North Sea. They would also have travelled inland along rivers in their small boats. People living all around the rim of the North Sea had more contact with each other than we might imagine today. In the years after the Romans withdrew from Britain, more and more people from Germany, Scandinavia and the Low Countries crossed the North Sea. This in itself was nothing new. We know that Saxons and Franks had arrived in Britain as soldiers and raiders in later Roman times. Once the Romans had left, however, they increasingly came to settle. Sometimes they may have been invited by local rulers to fight in the wars that then raged across Britain. Perhaps only a small number of immigrants came to England at this time. However, it seems that their arrival changed the region quickly. East England soon became Anglo-Saxon, with the whole population taking on the beliefs and way of life of the newcomers. We know this because archaeologists have excavated settlement and burial places of the period which are quite different from those of Roman times. East Anglian people were pagans in the 5th and 6th centuries, worshipping Woden, Thunor, Frigg and other Germanic deities. In the 7th century, England was converted to Christianity by missionaries from Europe, Western Britain and Ireland. We are told that in AD 633, the king of the East Angles gave a site to Furzy or Furza, a holy man from Ireland, for him to build a monastery. This site was pleasantly situated near to the sea and to forests and constructed in a castrum or Roman fort. A large Anglo-Saxon cemetery has been found outside the fort at Caister-on-Sea. However, excavation inside the Burgh Castle fort during 1958 to 1961 also discovered a cemetery, as well as traces of what might have been a wooden church. Furza and his monks would have lived and worked at either of these forts, or even both. Later in the 9th and 10th centuries, England saw raiding and then settlement by Scandinavian Vikings. Most of the Vikings who came to Eastern Europe were from Denmark. Many of today's place names in East Norfolk end with by, for example, Philby, Thrigby, Rollsby and other village names in the Isle of Flegg to the north of Great Yarmouth. They show that Vikings settled in this area. Many Norfolk people today are partly descended from Danish Vikings. After the Norman conquest in 1066, much property was taken from its English owners and given to followers of William the Conqueror. Many of these barons built castles in their new lands. In the late 11th or 12th century, a small castle was built in the southern part of the fort. The castle mound, or motte, made use of part of the southern defences of the Roman fort, and a big gap was cut through the south wall for the motte ditch. The castle mound was mostly flattened and the surrounding ditch filled in during the late 18th and early 19th centuries. However, its outline may still be seen at the southern end of the fort. This is the church of St Peter and St Paul at Burgh Castle. Parts of this church date back to 900 to 950 AD, and the tower was added about 950 to 1000 AD. It was probably built on the site of an earlier wooden Anglo-Saxon church. Reputedly, an earlier monastery, probably constructed of wood and clay, was built within the grounds of the Roman fort with the permission of King Sigebert of East Anglia in about 633 AD. Burgh Castle is one of Norfolk's most evocative Roman sites, with a striking location at the confluence of the Yare and Waveney rivers. This short circular walk, as well as taking in the Roman fort and the village's charming church, follows a bracing stretch of the Angles Way long-distance footpath along the southern bank of Breydon water east of the confluence. This is a classic broadland landscape of long views, vast reed beds, marshes, wading birds and windmills. Good evening again, everyone. Guess what? I'm in Norfolk tonight, and I'm joined by James, who you've seen before. And I'm joined by a new subscriber called Hardy.
Oh yeah.
Who's kind of like a local to this area. So this is a spot that he's picked out for us. We're at Burgh Castle near Great Yarmouth, and we're literally like kind of wild camping on the seawall by Breydon water. So we're not too far from the river Yare. And the river Breydon, I think, is back that way somewhere. I'm still learning the names of everywhere. We've just watched an incredible sunset. We've set up our tents. I'll show you what we've got in a little bit. Apologies for the wind noise. It's quite windy along this bit. It's quite open. So that's why I'm shouting. It's a bit chilly. It's going to get down to about 0 tonight, so a frosty one. Also celebrating 4,000 subscribers. Thank you very much. So we've got plenty of ciders to review. We've got 4 in fact, actually, 1 for every 1,000. So we've even got a massive box of donuts as well, which we'll crack out later on. We've got some good food. Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit more sort of as the evening unfolds. So have some fun. We'll chat to you soon. Apologies for that wind noise there. It was so open and windy on that spot where we were, even down behind the sea wall. So just to recap, we're celebrating 4,000 subscribers. Thank you very much, everyone. And I had 4, it turns out 5 ciders to review. So I had sort of 1 for every 1,000 subscribers and a big box of 12 donuts. Right, well, we're sat down sort of behind the sea wall, or the bank as it were, because it was really windy up where our tents were. We're next to James's Dutch Army hooped bivvy.
Because I camped where the smart people camp, out of the wind.
Out of the wind, yeah. So we're going to have to do our cooking down here. So James is cooking first on his bush box again. Yeah. And tell us exactly what you're having for dinner.
I'm having mulligatawny soup, which is obviously nice and curry-ish, with mackerel fillets in tomato sauce, because they mix in really nice, and you just end up with a really nice fish curry.
Nice.
It's really simple, it's really filling, it's a liquid, it's full of protein, and the rubbish literally fits in the size of 1 can.
Perfect. That's all you need, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nice.
Got to figure out where I put my nails.
So we've cracked open the first cider, which is the Rosie's Pig Rhubarb Cloudy Cider. 4%. Probably give this, I don't know, 8.5 out of 10. Why not? I do like a rhubarb cider, and this isn't too shabby. So, but yeah, I haven't really got much more to say on these. I'm running out of ideas to say about these ciders now. But and it's perfectly chilled because it is a bit nippy. We've just had some of the older donuts. So 3 down, 9 more to go. So I think James is having some for his breakfast.
Yeah, mate.
Breakfast of champions, yeah.
Breakfast donuts.
Definitely. Okay, James is going to tell you what shelter and sleep system he's got.
Yeah, so I've got a Dutch Army hoop bivvy, but it's the XL Corinthian. I bought it new. So inside, underneath it, I've got a military fly sheet, folded in half, just to keep more insulated and less damp getting through to it. Then I've got like an inflatable mattress from, I think it was Millets or something, you know, their own brand one. I forget what it's called.
Oh, no, pass. Go on.
And then a wool blanket. Then my Snowpack Chrysalis 4, and then I've got like another fleecy like blanket in there as well.
Nice.
And I brought those over in my LK35.
Very nice.
So
you've got the full camo gear on as well.
Well, this is my my military Gore-Tex.
Nice.
It's definitely made me a lot warmer since that wind
toasty warm.
Kicked up earlier.
And what's your next drink you're thinking of cracking out?
Ghost Ship, but but I'm struggling to locate some form of bottle opener.
Oh, you should have said.
And I was about to.
I thought you was sitting there quietly, looking wanting. Oh, okay. I've got a penknife. I'll grab you one in a minute. Yeah, I picked that up for you, I think, didn't I?
Yes, this is a gift from you. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. Ah, that reminds me, actually. James got me a little gift as well. Where is it?
There you go.
Oh, there we go. Cheers. So these are it's a tick remover. Did you say?
Yeah.
It's called O Tom, which we thought was quite entertaining. So yeah, I've now got myself a tick remover for those pesky woodland camps.
There's two of them in there.
Oh, there's two in there, is there?
And those are the basic, the generic kind of.
That's brilliant.
Design, but yeah, you know.
Thank you very much.
I'd rather you didn't get Lyme disease.
Cheers.
You know?
You're so thoughtful. Oh, well, I've just cooked myself up some Wayfarer beans and burgers. So a personal favourite. Hardy's had dinner. What have you had?
I've had a chicken tikka by Real Termat, which is absolutely lush.
Oh, very nice. And tell us about this Optimus heat thing you've got.
Well, this just basically keeps your meal warm once, because they average about 10 minutes while they rehydrate. And obviously by that time they're starting to get a bit cold, so if you put it in there, it keeps it warm.
Nice. Good little shout. Okay, welcome back. It's I think it's gone 10 o'clock now. 10:30, yeah. And we just had a bit of rain and some wind come up. So we sort of battened down the hatches a bit, and Hardy's got in his tent. He's up there in his Wild Country Helm 1. Looks a really good tent actually. We'll show you more of that in the morning. And yeah, I think basically we're going to sort of get in our respective shelters for the night, and probably speak to you more and each other in the morning. It's sort of coming and going, the rain at the moment. It's been a bit like that all day really. I mean, we had sort of like snow earlier. It wasn't settling though. So yeah, unfortunately we can't really set James's tarp up here. We can't find any like poles or anything really to set it up with, and it's not going to make too much difference really. The wind will just get underneath it. It's very, very open here. You know, if you know what Norfolk's like, it's very flat and it can be quite barren in places and open, so the wind does hack across. So yeah, anyway, I'll probably speak to you a little bit more in the tent, but it's good night to James.
Good night, YouTube.
You'll see him in the morning. Okay, so this is my Wild Country Zephyrus 1 tent. You've seen this before, in fact, in the last video. I've sort of just opened the door and sort of chucked a load of stuff in at the moment, so it's organised chaos. I'll collapse the chair and tuck it inside the porch. You know, it's a decent sized porch, this tent. And likewise with the table, I'm going to try and sort of cook in the doorway. I've got my dessert still, chocolate pudding, and another hot drink. I'll try and bung another couple of cider reviews in there for you, but I have to do it in the tent, I'm afraid. Probably the wind's picking up. Hardy's in his tent already. He's got the right idea, so yeah, this is his Wild Country Helm 1 tent. See you in the morning, mate. It's sound though, yeah. We're going to try and get up for about 6 AM. So the sunset was over there towards Berney Arms. It's a very, very remote pub hard to get to, and the Berney Arms Windmill or something. Berney Windmill, I think. Hardy will tell me. Loads of windmills around here, disused, you know, in use sort of things. Pretty cool. So the sunrise is probably going to be somewhere over there in the centre of the screen, and that's Great Yarmouth over there. So we're not far away, probably 3 or 4 miles, I guess. Anyways, yeah, I think the rain's just starting to come back, so I'm gonna get in a tent and I will chat to you in there. Bye. Okay, well, excuse the poor lighting, but I'm inside the tent now, as you can see, and it's much, much warmer in here, out of the wind, out of the rain. And I'm going to crack open another cider. This is the Recorder Lig Premium Botanicals range of ciders they do. They're fairly new. I had a few of these before, you've probably seen them before in other reviews, but I've not had this flavour. This is blackberry, violet, juniper. So it's only 4%, it's a little fruit cider. So it says pear cider blended with blackberry and infused with a hint of violet and juniper, made from pure Swedish spring water. It's gluten free and it's vegan for any of yous out there. So they're little 330ml bottles. Hasn't really got anything else to say about it, so let's crack it open, let's give it a try. Thank you once again for getting me to 4,000 plus subscribers. Oh, smells really nice, very fruity, organic smelling, and fresh and crisp. It feels like it could really like kind of clear your airways in a good way. And yeah, very kind of floral kind of taste to it, crisp, very refreshing. It almost feels like you're drinking like a nice cold sort of fizzy fruit juice. It's probably not, it's not really that strong at all. Very faint hint of pear, and yeah, blackberry, that goes really well together, blackberry and pear actually. Violet and juniper as well. Yeah, they sit really well together. None of them kind of overpower each other, they just mix just right. Yeah, but it's still kind of got, I don't know, there's something not quite right about it. There's just a slight taste that's sort of putting me off, that makes it taste, you know, it's very botanical and kind of plant, it just flowery sort of taste, and I can't really describe it. But anyway, I'm going to give that probably just a 7 out of 10, just because of that. It doesn't really taste like cider, it tastes, I don't know what it tastes like, but anyway, yeah, it's not bad, but probably wouldn't have that one again as such. But some of the other flavours like peach and basil are pretty decent. Okay, well, I've got in my sleeping bag now, and it's really cosy and warm in here. So you probably hear Hardy snoring in the background. The wind has died down a little bit. We can sort of hear all the wading birds and stuff on the Breydon water, which is literally other side of the seawall here. So it's just gone 12:30, and I thought, yeah, it's probably best get some sleep now, because we want to try and get up for the sunrise, which is around 6 AM I think. So I want to get a few hours sleep at least, and for that reason probably not going to have any more ciders tonight. To be honest with you, it was really difficult to sort of be sociable on this camp, just because of like the weather, and sort of the location where we are really wasn't really suitable for kind of, you know, sort of sitting around a campfire, and, you know, sort of even just sitting outside having a few drinks, because it's just too open and exposed here with the wind and the rain. So it's more of one of those get in your tent and sort of cook and drink in those sort of, you know, that sort of camp really. So kind of that's what we had to do in the end. But it's been good, still been good, and leave the ciders. So I had 2 in the end, not quite 4 or 5 that I'd promised, so I apologise. Yeah, I had beans and burgers, had the chocolate pudding, that was brilliant. I'll cook up some breakfast in the morning, nothing unusual really. Porridge, cereal bars, protein bars, hot chocolate, coffee, that sort of stuff as always. Yeah, looking forward to it. Anyways, get some sleep. I'll chat to you tomorrow morning. Good night from me. Everyone, it's about 6:30 and I've been up about an hour now. I decided to get up extra early to try and catch the sunrise, and I think we've had it really. It's a bit too cloudy really to film, but it sort of came up just sort of behind our tents there. So that's my tent nearest us, and then Hardy's tent is just behind it. And James has got his Dutch Army hooped bivvy somewhere there, down below like the sea wall. So he's nice and camouflaged. I'm the only one awake at the moment. And it's a little bit fresh out here, a little bit chilly, but yeah, I thought it'd be worth it to catch the sunrise, but it wasn't too spectacular really. Couldn't really see too much, as I say, there's too much cloud cover. It's a really quiet stretch, this section of the Angles Way. Apparently we shouldn't get that many people, if anyone, walking or whatever along this bit, so what we'll probably do is probably get back in a tent and maybe grab an extra hour's kip, something like that, and we'll go from there. I've had a little bit of breakfast already. Apologies if the wind noise is sort of muffling my voice. You can just see how open it is here. Norfolk's pretty flat, and yeah, the wind really cuts across here, but it's absolutely lovely though. So behind me is Breydon water, and of course back that way is the River Waveney, which I've well camped on before, and it's at this section here that the Waveney flows into the River Yare, and that flows all the way out to Great Yarmouth, which is behind me, so that's about 3 or 4 miles away. flows out to the sea there. Burgh Castle is back behind me, back along the sea wall. Hope you enjoyed the history about that. And on the other side of the riverbank you've got Berney Mill, which is what looks like a largely intact windmill. I think it might be owned by the National Trust. And not far from it as well you've got the Berney Arms pub, which is one of the most remote pubs in the country. You can only access it either by boat, on foot, or by train. I think it's the Yarmouth to Norwich train can actually stop sort of not too far away from it. You can get off there and then walk the rest of the way to the pub. Really tempting to go there one day. Probably won't do it today. I don't quite know if we've got enough time to do that amount of walking. It involves sort of heading off that way towards Yarmouth, and then I think going over, there's a crossing at some point somewhere, and then coming back around. But it's definitely on the cards though. A future trip. I'll definitely come back here and do more stuff in Norfolk. It's an amazing place. There's elements of it that remind me of Suffolk. I don't know. There's so much history here as well. It is amazing, but it's such a long drive to get up here. I mean, it took me 2 hours 45 minutes, so it's the furthest I've ever driven. Granted, I did break it up into a couple of bits because I picked James up. That was about halfway, so but yeah, it's a bit of a trek to get up here, so probably wouldn't come up here too often, but when I do, I'd probably come up here for like a week at a time and sort of do, a few walks, a few camps, a couple of explores, stuff like that, make the most of my time up here. So yeah, anyway, the clouds have covered the sun back over, so there's no real chance of a decent sunrise this morning, I don't think. We did get a really good sunset last night though, so can't complain. Anyway, I'm going to get back in the tent, back in the warm, and grab an extra hour's sleep probably, so we'll chat to you soon. Good morning again. It's about 9 o'clock now and we are all awake. Here's Hardy, he's just starting to pack up. How did you sleep?
Good, mate.
Very good?
Yeah, very good.
How was the Helm one?
Brilliant, as always, mate.
As always. And James is here with the donuts. Sleep well?
Yeah, not too bad.
Very good, yeah.
Shoulder on a pin.
The weather has cleared up a lot since I last spoke to you. We're still a bit cloudy, but it's nowhere near as cold. The sun was out briefly, so we're going to start getting packed up. We're sort of burning some of our rubbish and any sort of bits of fire we've got down sort of on the foreshore. Got my fire pit. Couldn't have a fire last night, it was far too windy and we probably would have been spotted, so we're having it down there out of the way now. And the rain as well, yeah. We've got 2 donuts left, so we've smashed through a pack of 12. Yeah, my tent was nice. I'm glad I brought it with me, so I was thinking of taking something else, I don't know what, but yeah, it was all good. Oh, there's a boat coming. It's there. And I just felt a couple of spots of rain. You see a walker approaching in the distance. There was a couple that passed us earlier on this morning. They was fine, we had a little chat with them. Yeah, so I think we start getting packed up. We're going to head back to Burgh Castle, walk that way back to the cars, so we'll probably show you some of the journey then. Yeah, chat to you soon. Okay, welcome back. We are literally about 30 seconds away from the cars now, and that is the end of this video. It's been a brilliant trip up to Norfolk. I want to say a big thank you to Hardy for joining us.
Nice one, mate.
Yeah,
Cheers, mate. And of course, cheers to James as always. Leave me hanging, mate. Jesus. And yeah, it's been brilliant. Yeah, I've had a really good camp. Nice walk. It's been cold, yeah. It was a bit chilly up there and windy. Saw Burgh Castle. Lots of history. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Get in the comments, let us know what you think. Cheers for watching. See you again soon. Take care of yourselves. Look after each other. Stay safe and get out there and explore. We'll see you again soon. Bye. Bye. Lined in.